Now, after bishop b4 check, bishop d2, bishop e7, it's going to be a little bit harder for white because now the bishop from d2 takes away one of the squares for the knight, and it's going to be probably better for white to either play the bishop c3, knight bd2 setup, or play early queen c2, followed by trying to figure out where best to place this d2 bishop, perhaps to f4 or even g5. So this is what we're gonna look at now. So after bishop e7, bishop g2, castle, castle, c6, we have what is called the closed Catalan. Now the idea behind the system for black is to put as much defense on the d5 pawn, so black is playing against the opening of the g2 bishop, and black is gonna play b6 followed by bishop b7 or even bishop a6 and knight bd7 and simply try to finish his development. Now white, on the other hand, also has a very simple plan to play either queen c2 followed by bishop f4, rook d1 plan, and then depending on what black does, develop the knight either to c3 or to b2. So this is one of the possible plans. Another plan is actually to play immediate bishop g5 followed by knight bd2 and finish his development this way. So we're going to look at actually both of these plans because the ideas are very similar, and the goal here is, instead of learning tons and tons of theory, you want to understand the ideas and plans and typical structures, and the whole weight of the game is going to be shifted towards the middle game. So let's go back and start with the simplest approach to this position, the move bishop to g5. Again, taking the pawn on c4 is something which is not recommended. White has several good ways to play here. White can play a4, followed by recapturing the pawn with either knight a3 or knight bd2, and knight takes c4. Or white, of course, can try to play knight e5, but a4 we recommend, which is a better alternative. Now, black typically doesn't take the pawn on c4 and develops simply with knight bd7, and as I mentioned earlier, b6 and bishop b7 plan. Here white can play knight bd2. Notice that you save the tempo, you don't have to play queen c2 yet. b6, queen c2. Of course you can play rook c1, but white has many options, so I'm just showing you one possible way to play in this position. For example, bishop b7. And now the conceptual idea behind white's setup with queen c2, knight bd2 and bishop on g5 is to go for e4. Notice how white keeps on attacking the center, and the main idea is to open up his powerful g2 bishop. So this position actually happened in the recent game between Gregory Kaidanov and Stefansson, Grandmaster from Iceland. Let's take a look what happened. After d takes e, knight takes e4, there were more exchanges. After c5, knight takes f6, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, And now Kaironov played very interesting idea, very strong move, knight to e5. As you notice, the taking on e5 favors white because there is a move in between, bishop takes b7. Now we have the rook attacked and the knight attacked on e5. So black cannot do this. So Stephenson chose a different line. He played bishop takes g2, knight takes d7, and it looks as though black is in trouble, but Stephenson finds this very interesting idea, queen f3. And now after knight takes f8, it looks as though after bishop h3, white is having some problems, but in reality black is losing after queen takes h7. Notice the knight on f8 does the job of defending the queen. And of course, king takes knight, queen takes bishop wins. So what does this mean? Well, this means that black has to take on f8. And now after the very strong move queen b3, black is facing some serious problems. Because after queen takes b3, a takes b, bishop takes f1, king takes f1, the pawn on a7 is really weak, and if c takes d, rook takes a7, this is almost winning position for white. Because the pawn on b6 is weak, king is gonna march to d3, pawn on d4 is weak. And of course we have the two extra pawns on the queen side. White should easily win the game. Again, this illustrates that even in the closed catalog, after everything is exchanged, there are still tricks left, and if you're familiar with these positions, your opponent might really get in trouble in the middle game. So we have covered the approach of bishop g5, knight bd2. Very easy development for white, followed by queen c2 and e4, as in the game Kaironov-Stephenson. But now let me show you some other interesting options which are quite similar, but they differ in the sense that bishop usually goes to f4. So white plays queen c2, b6, and notice that in these positions black somehow always has to solve the problem of the c8 bishop, whether the bishop goes to a6 or b7. Nevertheless, it's gonna get stuck behind the white pawn chain c6, d5, e6. The light square pawn chain cannot favor the c8 bishop. And now simple bishop f4 developing move. Again, bishop b7 or bishop a6. Well, let us look at bishop a6 first, with the idea to put pressure on the c4 pawn. Knight bd2, knight bd7. And now white has several alternatives here. White can play b3 and build up his position, followed by rook fd1, rook ac1, or even perhaps a4, a5 plan. Also, white can go for immediate, try to take over the c5 with the move rook f to c1, or a simple move rook f to d1 followed by perhaps knight e5, or even e4, the right move. So of course white has all of these different plans, and this is a complicated middle game position where it's a matter of taste to choose all of these different options. But let me quickly show you what could happen after rook f to c1, which is the move chosen by Nakamura against another top grandmaster, Ivanchuk, super grandmaster I should say. And Ivanchuk tried to solve the immediate problem in the center with the move c5. And after queen a4, bishop b7, knight e5, it's clear that black still has some serious problems to solve. Knight c6 is coming up. If knight takes e5, pawn takes e5, and again, if knight d7, then white can now play c takes d. For example, if e takes d, perhaps even knight c4 move, followed by knight d6. So all of these options are available for white. So again, this shows you that in the closed Catalan, black doesn't challenge white's ability to develop his pieces, and almost always you have a very easy playing and typical middle game positions which are quite good for white. So we quickly took a look at the move bishop to a6, and now let's take a look at the other development option, bishop to b7. Again, white has several options to choose from. The easiest one is simple rook to d1, knight b d7, now knight c3. And here if black tries to be greedy and take the pawn on c4, white has a very nice plan. After knight d2, now black has to play b5 or knight d5. Well, b5 is no fun, especially after the next move a4, followed by either central play with e4 or even knight d to e4. So the position here is not so great for black, because if black plays b4, we can simply draw back with the knight. c4 pawn is going to get lost. And if black plays something like a6, then white gets back the pawn. Knight takes b5, and again, because the b7 bishop is hanging after c takes b, white gets a great game. So taking the pawn and defending with b5, perhaps not the best option. So let's take a look at knight to d5 move. So the idea here is that black doesn't mind losing the c4 pawn back, but he's gonna get the powerful bishop on f4. And again, this is one of the very common ideas in the Catalan. After knight takes pawn, knight takes f4, g takes f. Even though black has the bishop pair, white has very strong pawn structure. The pawns d4 and f4 are very powerful. For example, white can play e3, knight e5. Notice how everything is well placed, whereas the pawn on c6 is always a weakness in black's camp. And after a possible knight to f6, now knight e5, threatening c6, queen c8, knight e4, white just simply has a very good position and can continue to put more pressure on black with the move rook a to c1. So again, don't be afraid sometimes to exchange the f4 bishop for the knight. The pawn on f4 is closer to the center, helps support the e5 outpost for the knight, and if you connect the pawns with e3, this is a nice, fluid, and at the same time dynamic pawn structure. So on this, we are finished covering the closed Catalan.